from his studios in New York, it's time for Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports meets life. Here's your host, Dan Tortora.
Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on wakeupcalldt.com, your one-stop sports shop, as well as on mixlr.com/wakeupcalldt, Facebook Live on facebook.com/livenowdt, and on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. So plenty of ways to connect with us live, and we appreciate y'all doing that, as well as checking out the archives. I am very honored and privileged to have my special guest, my spotlight guest on today's show, Randy Edsall. Randy was connected to one of my closest, nearest, and dearest friends in my life, Rob Drummond, and was integral part of bringing him into Syracuse, and was there with the running backs, and obviously had a connection to some awesome Syracuse times. And then moving forward from that into UConn, and bringing UConn from FCS to FBS, going off to Maryland, and now coming back to UConn, joining the American Athletic, and now being an independent school. So you can imagine we have a lot to discuss, and Randy's someone that I used to get to talk to on the teleconferences for the American Athletic, and now I feel very honored to have some extended time with a guy that I have respected from afar for a while. So with that being said, Randy, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, Randy, and you know, I mean, this has been a very interesting world for you. We were talking about it off the air, that you don't make anything easy for yourself. Your decisions of where you go and what you do have always been a challenge. Why do you run toward the tornado as opposed to away from it?
Well, I just think it's just been the way that I was brought up. You know, that nothing was ever easy. You know, you always had to work for what you got, and it's just that I always love the fact that people tell you can't do something, or you're not going to be successful, at a certain place. And, it's just the competitiveness in me that says, I just want to prove people wrong. And I guess that's something that was always instilled in me in an early age, in terms of, where I grew up at. And in a real small town, we had one signal light, and just not really known for a lot of different things. And then, it's just kind of been ingrained in me all these years, and it's just something that, you just like to, like I said, you like to prove people wrong. You like to take on challenges.
Yeah, and maybe that's why you and I have, found a way to connect with each other throughout history. Is I like to be the redheaded stepchild, and you do too. So what has the challenge of, these different things, when you said when people tell you can't, it makes you want to prove it wrong, and, you don't mind the fact that there's naysayers and haters out there. A lot of people run away from that. You and I run toward it. What has taught you in your life that's, with these experiences you've had, and really not caring what other people think and wanting the challenge? What has that done to, make you the person that you are today? How would you kind of describe the adversity you faced and what it's done for you?
Well, I think that the one thing is, life is all about opportunities, and it's what you make of those opportunities. And I kind of look at it, and I understand the profession and the business that I'm in. It's all about winning and everything else, but there's more to it than just how many wins you have, in terms of what I think terms for you to be successful, because of, you're dealing with young people and you're coaching young people. So my whole thing is this, going into jobs, it might not, wasn't always perfect going there, but then what you were going to do is, because you were going to surround yourself with the right staff, you were going to go out and recruit the right people, is that you could take something and make it better than what it was. And I think that's the role of anybody that's going in to accept new opportunities. You want to go in and make that situation better than what you inherited. And I think that's just something that I've always been the underdog, and I just kind of like that role, that yeah, it creates a little bit more work, maybe a little bit more stress. But like I said, the end result is when you talk about, you bring a young man like Robert Drummond into the program at Syracuse, and you work with him for, 4 or 5 years, and you see that growth and that maturation and that development of Robert, and to know that you played a part in that, a small part in that, and then to see them go on and be successful, that's really what it's all about. And that's really what, drives me. So as long as you can go to a place that, that affords you the opportunity to help to make young people better, and if you have the right people, eventually you're gonna be successful and you're gonna win.
Coming here from Randy Edsall this morning, a UConn football head coach. Randy, I want to go back. You have an amazing history in my book and a lot of connections to some really cool places and people. I want to go back to high school for you. Football, basketball, and baseball. You played at Susquehannock High School in Glen Rock, Pennsylvania. Bring me into playing 3 different sports and what you took away from being in Glen Rock, Pennsylvania, and how often maybe you try to go back to your hometown.
Well, that's one of the things that I really miss nowadays, recruiting a 3-sport athlete, because I thought that by playing football, basketball, and baseball, and then I golfed in the summertime as well, but by doing that, I just thought that you didn't wear your body out as much for one particular sport. You just you gave yourself a chance for more room for development and growth as you got older and moved forward. But growing up in the town that I grew up in, our high school was really made up of 3 towns: Glen Rock, New Freedom, and Shrewsbury. And it was just the work ethic that was instilled by my parents, and always making sure you did things the right way. And if you were gonna get something, you had to work for it. You weren't going to be given anything. And I just look at, like, basically everything was revolved around sports. We were always doing something. We might have been out in the backyard shooting hoops, whether it was football practice or baseball, and playing summer baseball, high school baseball. We were always doing something. And the guys in the community, we had a community building and it was a basketball court, and you'd go down and play against older guys, so you learned how to be competitive. And there weren't any parents there. It was just pickup games, and you played. So I was lucky to grow up in a town like that, because to me, I think you learn a lot more. And it just gave me the drive and the work ethic, and it gave me the fortitude to say, hey, everything's not always going to go the right way. So if you just stick to it and you keep doing what you're supposed to do, things will work out in the long run.
And you made the decision coming out of high school to go to Syracuse. You were there under head coach Frank Maloney, and in 1979, the Independence Bowl, the team won that. You were a quarterback on Syracuse's team. Why did you choose Syracuse, and what was the experience like under Frank Maloney?
Well, really, I had 2 offers coming out of high school. I had Syracuse, and I had the University of Delaware. And I had Delaware, early on, and then Syracuse came in, and the opportunity that presented itself. I can still remember, driving to Syracuse after a high school basketball game on a Friday night, and we got into into town and stayed at it was a Holiday Inn at that time, the circular one right down there off the 81. Yep. And got in like at 3 a.m. and went on my visit, and they never even showed us the inside of Archibald Stadium at that time. But it was a great experience for me. Frank Maloney, to this day, I can't thank him enough for what he did for me. Tom Coughlin was my position coach, but the opportunity that they gave me, being there, and then just, meeting the people that I met there as teammates that I had, Bill Hurley, Art Monk, Joe Morris, Gary Anderson, guys like that were on our team. And then, Frank gave me the opportunity to get in coaching. I finished up, and he asked me to stay on as a graduate assistant. And, I was thinking I'm going to go back to Pennsylvania and coach high school and be a teacher and all that. And I said, well, I might as well stay and get my master's paid for, because it'll put more money in my pocket if I go that other route. And, lo and behold, one thing led to another after that year. Then Coach McPherson kept me on as a part-time coach. And, I played at Syracuse for 4 years, and then I worked there for 11 in the coaching aspect of it. And then I went from there because of my connection at Syracuse to Boston College with Tom Coughlin, and went to BC with Tom, and then down to Jacksonville with Tom. And then because of the connection, I worked with George O'Leary. I went to Georgia Tech for a year as a defensive coordinator. So, you talk about the relationships and the opportunities that I got because of the people that I was surrounded by at Syracuse is what put me in the position to have the opportunities I've had in my coaching career.
Speaking here with Randy Edsall on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Cafe Cubal studios. Randy, there's really no way around what you just said except for to say these three words with a question mark at the end, but also an exclamation point. You were spoiled.
Is
that fair?
I was around a lot of good people, and you take a look at Frank Maloney's staff that he had when he was at Syracuse. Tom Coughlin, George O'Leary was on that staff. Jerry Angelo, longtime general manager. Dennis Fitzgerald, who ended up coaching in the NFL for many, many years. Kenny Baker, who's very successful in real estate down in Florida. I was fortunate. And, Gary Blackney, who came on Dick McPherson's staff, and then the people that Mac had, a lot of guys went on to be head coaches. And, and the big thing was, I think, because of, my background is, a guy I'm still in touch with today, Jim Rogers, was very successful in business, was coached at Florida and a couple other places after he left Syracuse. But those guys kind of were my mentors and brought me up, through the profession and got me, in position to have the opportunities I had. So, I'm forever grateful. And when people say that, or people don't think that relationships matter, relationships are huge in terms of your life, in terms of not only helping you maybe connect to other opportunities, but also to show you and teach you how to do things so you can have those opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, and it is, and you talk about these relationships, and it's incredible the people that you got to be around, and you hear these names. I mean, I hear these names, the Tom Coughlins and the George O'Learys and the Frank Maloneys and Coach Mack and all of that, and it really does make you stop. And I've seen a lot of these. I've interviewed Tom Coughlin on my path and George O'Leary, and to think about the Syracuse staff that was there and getting to meet Coach Mack before he passed away. For you, Randy, to be with Frank Maloney, and for him to give you an opportunity as a player, like you said, you had two offers, Syracuse and Delaware, coming out of high school. For him to give you an opportunity to play, and then right after to say, I'd like you to get into coaching. I mean, that doesn't happen every day, that a coach is actually a part of two chapters of your life, giving you an opportunity to play and then giving you an opportunity to coach. What will you always appreciate about Frank Maloney, that he affected two different things in your life, and he essentially opened the door for you twice in your life?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and then I was still in touch with Frank up until the time that he passed away. I think the biggest thing was he was always upfront and honest, with you. He never told you what you wanted to hear. He always told you what you needed to hear. And I can still remember the time, because I was ready to leave Syracuse and go home. It was in my junior year. And I remember calling my dad and telling my dad that, talking to him, and he said, well, if you're going to do that, then you go in and you're going to see Coach Maloney, and you're going to go in and talk to him face to face. So I went in and I talked to Coach Maloney and told him, I said, Coach, just don't think it's going to work out here. I'm gonna head home and look to do something else. And he kind of sat back and was kind of taken back. He said, he just says, well, I think that's going to be the wrong decision for you. I don't think that's the right decision. He said, and I'm not going to guarantee you're ever going to play here, but I think if you ever went home, he knew where I came from. And he said, if you ever go home, he said, I don't know if that's going to be, it's going to make you successful. And so I left, and then he said, think about it. And, next day I went in, I thought about it and everything else, and, I decided to stay. And thank God I did. And, thank God that, because, not only him, but when I left, Coach Zuccarelli, who's passed away, our DB coach, I was in the locker room, and he came and got me and talked to me. And fortunately, I had people who cared about me, and but told me straight up, and that was the thing that I'll remember about Frank, is just giving me those opportunities, always believing in me, and always just, telling me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. And I think that's something that I've carried along with, how I handle my own players, over the years as an assistant coach and then as a head coach.
And for you, kind of two pieces here, because Syracuse talks so much about Ben Schwartzwalder and Coach Mack, and there isn't, and Paul Pasqualoni, but there's not always a lot of chatter about Frank Maloney. What should Syracuse fans know about Coach Maloney, number one? And number two, what did it mean to you that when it went from Maloney to Coach Mack, that Coach Mack kept you on the staff and wanted you to be there, which prolonged your time at Syracuse and obviously helped you out with being a running backs coach, a tight ends coach, and then switching to the defensive side? So what should fans know about Coach Maloney? And secondly, what did it mean to you that Coach Mack saw something in you to keep you on the staff when there was obviously a changing of the guard at that point?
Well, first of all, I don't think Coach Maloney ever got the respect that he should have gotten at Syracuse. He had to come in and replace Coach Schwartzwalder. The program was really down. The facilities were really bad. He had to do some of the things that, and maybe said some things that people didn't like, but the program wasn't in real good shape. But if you take a look, at the people that came through the Frank Maloney era, some of the best players in the history of Syracuse football, Art Monk, Joe Morris, different guys, Gary Anderson, all these guys. If you take a look, Bill Hurley, there were quite a few guys. He did a really good job of developing players and getting guys, to come to a place that didn't even have, anywhere close to the same facilities of the people that we were competing against, in the East. And so that's the thing. The other thing that, and this was the thing, and Frank was an extreme and probably one of the most intelligent coaches that I've been around. One of the things that when I remember when he told me that I was going to be a GA, and that you only had one GA at the time, and he told me, he says, Randy, he said, hey, offense and you understand that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you over on defense as a GA so you can learn that side of the ball. So here's a guy, who's looking after me to help me, because I knew, I was pretty smart, in terms of understanding what we were doing offensively and everything else. I just wasn't as good athletically as to get on the field as those other guys. But to do that, to put me over there, was a tremendous asset to me, because now I learned both sides of the ball. I played offense, but now I was going over on defense and learning that. So, and then when Mac came in, it was fortunate to be able to stay on, because, I knew a lot of the guys in terms of, making that transition and being helpful. And he bumped me up to a part-time coach. And some of that was, I think, helped with George. O'Leary helped with that, because George got kept on as well. Probably put a good word in for me. And, but then just working my way up. Again, all you're doing is you're just proving yourself. And, going from, running back, from tight ends to running backs. And then when Gary Blackney, I learned under Gary Blackney there, and who was a really good, defensive back coach, and then had the opportunity, because I still remember Frank Maloney always told me, he said, if you coach the offensive line and you coach the defensive backs and you do a good job, you're always going to have a job, because those are probably the two hardest positions that are in football that you have to coach. And back then, nobody broke the secondary up. You were coaching all four, or you were coaching five. It was a nickel. They didn't break it up, safeties and corners back then. You were doing that whole thing. So, and then just, getting the facilities that we got, and, that was something that, I was appreciative of Mac keeping me on, and then giving me opportunities to go from, tight ends to running backs, and over to defense. And I was recruiting coordinator, and, we recruited some pretty good players in that time, and we also, won quite a few games.
Randy, you were a part of Archibald Stadium and the evolution of going from Archibald into the Dome. So many things that happened in Syracuse, you were a physical part of. Like, we look at history, you lived it. What was it like playing at Archibald Stadium and then transitioning over and being a part of the Syracuse group that got to officially open the Dome? I mean, you got to close a monumental place in Archibald, and you got to open a monumental place in the Dome, which so few people can say they were part of one, let alone both.
Yeah, well, Archibald Stadium, I can still remember being in there in a pregame my freshman year, and it wasn't a very good home locker room, but above it there was like an animal laboratory, I believe, up there. They had animals, and so Frank's giving his pregame speech, and he's up on a bleacher, and the rah-rah, and Frank was a great motivator. I mean, he could get you going, and he's in the middle of his speech, and all of a sudden you hear these dogs start barking, everything. So you have that, but then, you said, like, the last game in Archibald, I threw a pick right before half, and then at the end of that game, I can still remember the fans and the Syracuse police. They were on horses. They had that cinder track around it, and it was all concrete stands and everything else, and people started coming on the field. Like, the police were down at one end, and they take the horses up by the other end, and they were down there, and I mean, lo and behold, you couldn't do it. And I can still remember a few of us, Bruce Babcock and maybe a couple other guys, after the game, we just kind of locked our arms together and had our helmets strapped on, and we just kind of ran and through a bunch of people, knocked people down just to get to the locker room. But in its day, I'm sure it was a great venue, but it kind of outgrew its time. But then to go to knock Archibald down in my senior year, we played every game on the road that year, which was an experience in itself. We played 2 games in the Meadowlands, 2 games in Rich Stadium in Buffalo, and then we played 1 game at Sholkoff Field at the end of the year. So we had to play every game on the road while the Dome was being built. And then to go into the Dome, I mean, at that time, I mean, that was as good a place as there was in the country to play. And, knowing that it was in the same spot as Archibald, and giving you that home field advantage, because it was loud in there. And, back then they didn't have air conditioning either. And so on a hot day, you could really wear teams out. It was different from a breathing standpoint. So it was a tremendous home field advantage, the Dome, and it sat right on campus, which made it nice for the students. And, just those experiences of playing in Archibald and then coaching in the Dome is something that, I'll always remember and cherish.
Bill Hurley, Joe Morris, Art Monk, Gary Anderson, you named off your teammates. They all played in the NFL. Tremendous players. What can you say about what they taught you, and do you try to keep some relationships still going today?
Yeah, I probably in touch with Bill the most, Hurley. But they were all competitors, all good guys. Art was quiet. He didn't say a whole lot. Then Gary Anderson, I actually hosted him on his visit, and there's one of the best kickers of all time in the NFL. And Joe was just a competitor. That's the one thing. Guys that just wanted to compete, guys that played with chips on their shoulders, and guys that really just we enjoyed each other. We had a good time, and we liked each other's company.
We saw that Joe Morris finally got his jersey retired. Are you surprised it took that long?
Yeah, I mean, I still, remember when he ran into the side of the wall in the Miami of Ohio game, and in the first game in the Carrier Dome when they didn't have padding on the concrete walls, but I mean, I don't know if there was a more competitive guy than Joe, and bow-legged but strong and could really run. I would have thought that his jersey would have gotten retired a lot sooner than that,
Speaking here with Randy Edsall on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Cafe Cubal studios. When you were on the staff and you were recruiting, you brought up Rob Drummond. Give me some of the names that you helped as recruiting coordinator, as running backs coach, as different things you got to do at Syracuse. Just some of the people that you got to work with bringing in, Rob included. And, I mean, you had a backfield that had some pretty incredible talent. You had your Michael Owens and your Rob Drummonds and so on and so forth. So bring us back a little bit, nostalgia, and what it was like for you to recruit. Because back then, Syracuse was recruiting the best of the best, whether it was in the backyard or a little bit farther away. And, you, again, I say spoiled as a joke, but in all honesty, very blessed to have, the people that came into Syracuse. But at the same time, credit to you for having the wherewithal to know where the talent was and to go out and get it as well.
Well, I was fortunate because I had, I was a recruiting coordinator, but I also had two pretty fertile areas to recruit from in Eastern PA and then down in Florida. And back then, I mean, it's recruiting's a relationship game. And I was a lot younger than I am now, and and it was easy to relate to those guys and get in with them, and I knew what they were going through, and it's kind of like my son here now at UConn doing the same thing. But I mean, and it's just saddens me, but I was at Markus Paul's funeral just not too long ago, but I recruited Markus, and there was a guy nobody recruited out of high school. It was us in Southwest Louisiana for him, and wanted an opportunity at quarterback, and we told him he'd have an opportunity, but once he got on campus and Donnie McPherson was there, he saw that I better go to defense. But Dwayne Joseph, was another guy who ended up playing in the pros for a number of years. John Flannery from Pottsville, who was a really good player. Cadre Ismail, so as you said, Michael Owens. There's a lot of them. There's too many that I can't remember, and E.J. Dowdell, from right there in Nottingham, and bunch of guys. But and that's the thing that's neat, because you still stay in touch with those guys, and you don't see them as much. But Rob Drummond, I mean, just to be able to bring guys in and see the success they had, it was obviously we made the right decision, not only from a talent standpoint, but also from a character standpoint. And then, Terry Richardson, Michael Owens, those guys. So, it's neat to see those guys. I saw David Holmes at the funeral. The one year I coached Chris Ingram, God rest his soul, as well. But, I had the opportunity to coach, those guys, Jeff Mangrum and David Holmes and Markus, and Chris. That was as good a defensive backfield, I think, Syracuse is ever one of the best ones they've ever had. So, those were the good things that you remember those times, and it was just a bunch of fun.
You talk about those relationships, Randy, and the ones that you create. When you were there playing, having Tom Coughlin and George O'Leary on the staff, and then you got to go work with Tom at BC and then with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and got to work with George O'Leary at Georgia Tech. What did those moments mean to you, and what was it like to work for Tom Coughlin collegiately and in the NFL, and then to work with George O'Leary, two guys that I greatly respect, that came from Syracuse, and on that staff, and obviously built some awesome coaching trees as well and success for themselves. What was it like to work for Tom Coughlin and then to work for George O'Leary?
Well, people would always say, God, Tom's got to be the toughest guy to work for, and because when you played for him, he was very, it was attention to detail. As a quarterback, everything was done, your footwork was done on a clock, and you were supposed to open at 4 o'clock, and he said, no, you opened at 4:30. He was very meticulous, but as working for him as a coach, he was the easiest guy I've ever worked for in my life, because he always spelled out everything that he wanted, and as long as you did the stuff you were supposed to do, you did your job, you never had to worry about anything, and he was always a guy that told you, said, hey, when your work gets done, go walk out the front door, don't be walking out the back door. So I always thought he was easy to work for, because you knew what the expectations were, you knew what he was looking for, and he wasn't a guy that was wishy-washy, didn't spend a whole lot of time and didn't waste time in meetings and things along those lines. So that's the stuff, and very smart. And then, the experience that he had being when he left and went to BC and then went to the pros and then became the head coach at BC. So again, guys like that, the same thing with George, you try to sit there and listen to what they're saying, not how they're, like George, you had to listen to George in terms of what he was saying, not how he was saying it. Because if you listened to how he said it, and if you weren't the right type of person, it could affect you, but, but George now, the other thing with George is when assistants, just watching him recruit and how he, he could, go into the homes and with the parents, because he recruited Tim Green and coached him in high school, but just to see how he handled himself, and then just the way he coached, because we've the 4-wheel drive we had there at Syracuse with those guys, and Blaze Winter and Tim and Jamie Kimmel, George coached those guys, so you could learn a lot from him. Then you go and work for him, you knew how he was, so it was probably easier for me working for George and maybe somebody that hadn't worked for him, because you know how he's gonna handle certain things. But the same thing is, as long as you communicate with people, you never usually have any issues. But those two guys were very helpful and very accommodating to help me, get what I wanted to, or help me get to where I wanted to get to, because I was with Tom at the Jaguars and left to go to Georgia Tech with George, because I wanted to be a head coach, and I interviewed for a job when I was at Jacksonville, college job, and they said, well, you've never been a coordinator before. So I had to make the decision and I made a decision. George had an opening, called me, and he called me before, and I told him, no, I can't go. And he said, well, this will be the last time I ever call you for a job. So after having that experience, they said, you've never been a coordinator. I said, well, I'm going to go get qualified on paper, so nobody can say, well, you've never been a coordinator. So that's when I went up to Georgia Tech in 1998 and was a coordinator there with him for that year, and we tied for the ACC championship and beat Notre Dame in the bowl game. And then the next year, then I got the job here at UConn. So, those are the connections that really help you. And again, as long as you sit there and you listen, you take things in, those guys like that are only going to make you better.
That coming here from Randy Edsall. Randy, before I let you go, UConn not once but twice. We've talked about it a little bit before, but we can expand on it now. You made the decision to go to UConn. You helped to lead them from a Division I AA FCS program into the FBS Division I-A. Bring me into that process, which few coaches in the world have to really go through. So bring me into that process of bringing them from FCS to FBS. And then secondly, why did you come back?
Well, coming here, Lou Perkins was the athletic director at that time, and he had a vision for what they were going to do, and knowing that you were going to be FCS and then you were going into back then what the Big East would be known as the Power Five conference. You were going to be going into the Big East. It gave you the tools that you needed, and they were going to build a brand new stadium, East Hartford, Rentschler Field, and then we ended up building a football building here on campus, which is as good as any facility in the country, bar none. But knowing that you had that support, and it wasn't one of those things where, Lou understood that it wasn't going to happen overnight, that you had to build the program. And seeing that they did have success here in basketball, you felt that, you were coming to where, I felt that Lou knew what it took to be successful, and he was going to give you the resources to be successful. And that's all you want as a coach, is as long as people give you those resources. And, it took us, like 4 years to get to where we really needed to get to. And then we started doing the things that we needed to do. And then, ended up going to the Fiesta Bowl there in the 2010 season, in 2011 there, January 1st. And then coming back, I saw, kind of what was taking place with the program, and knowing in terms of what we built here before, and to see where it was at, you say, okay, let me see if we can go get this done again. But, coming back, it was, you weren't in the Big East. Now you were in the American Conference. And I think we're well on the way to going to where we need to go. I mean, you just can't take a program and turn it overnight. To me, it takes time, where you got to bring in the right people, because this is a program where, you're going to go out and develop kids. You got to find kids that have the ability, have the work ethic, and you're going to develop them. And, that's a 2 to 4 year process at least, to get those type of kids to do that, and then to be able to be competitive and win with the schedule that you're going to be playing. So that's kind of what we've been focusing on, was player development and getting kids, because again, now all of a sudden you don't have the Big East cachet that you can throw out there, and then leaving the American and going independent. It's we're going to play more Power 5 schools, so that is helpful, but it's just that process that you're going through. But as we go into 2021, I feel like this will be our best team, and by not playing last year has really helped the kids that we have on our team get a lot bigger and stronger, because most of them didn't redshirt because they've had to play because they were the best guys we had. But now having them have that year where they've been able to lift and get bigger and stronger, and we've been able to do more from a football standpoint, from a scheme and mental standpoint. I think we're going to be well positioned here in 21 to have a good year, and it's just something now you have to go and continue to build on. The fact that you're going to be playing 4 to 5 Power 5 schools, each and every year, and then you're going to play Army and some of the other schools here locally, and just find those kids that dare to be different. That's basically what it comes down to. Who wants that challenge? And that's what it is. It's a challenge, and find those kids that want that type of challenge, that want to do something that maybe people don't think they can do.
Why Maryland in the middle of all that, when they were a part of the ACC? Why did you want to kind of challenge yourself and go that route before you came back to UConn?
Well, I was always a Maryland fan growing up, because I grew up right basically on the Pennsylvania-Maryland border. So growing up, I wasn't a Penn State fan. I wasn't a Phillies fan. I wasn't anything of a Pennsylvania fan. I was a Baltimore fan. I was a Orioles fan. I was a Colts fan. I was a Maryland fan. And that was something that was always intriguing to me. And then plus at that point in time, I'd lost my dad, and so my mom was down in that area, and it was something where I could get back closer to home and be around her a little bit more, by being there. But it was just one of those things where, I was a Maryland fan growing up, and then, we went through the same thing there. We were in the ACC, and then all of a sudden we go to the Big Ten. It made that jump. So it's I've had a lot of interesting things during my career, but nothing that I would ever change.
Yeah, I mean, Randy, you went, like you said, Maryland from the ACC to the Big Ten move. You did the move with UConn from the FCS to the FBS. You did move with UConn from the Big East to we don't know to the American, now to the Independent. Do you feel like everywhere you go, there's some type of ripple effect that God puts in the water? I mean, are you afraid to go anywhere else at this point, thinking that, maybe they won't even jump conference, they'll go play in another country at this point because you've seen so many different things happen?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's what makes life interesting, and that's why you always just, you try not to assume anything. You just take it one day at a time. And you know what? There's people that have things a lot worse than what I do, in terms of doing all those different things that you just talked about. So to me, it's just one of those things where you just, each day you get up and you attack each day, knowing that you just give everything, your best ability, give 100% to what you're going to try to do that day to make the situation that you're in better. And at the end of the day, you go to bed, you put your head on the pillow, and you wake up and you do the same thing the next day. And that's kind of what's, driven me and gotten me to where I'm at. And when the time comes where I feel like, hey, I've given it all I have, and, I'm going to go down to my house in Florida and relax and play golf and travel and enjoy, that part of the next chapter, So, like I said, life's going to throw you a bunch of different curveballs, and how you react to them is going to determine the success that you have or the happiness you have with what you do. And I've been very fortunate because this is my 41st year of coaching, and the one thing that I'll always appreciate and is those relationships, and going into people's home, just like Frank Maloney did to me, come into my home and gave me an opportunity. Yeah. And then see what that's done. And to be able to do that as a coach and as a mentor and a parent away from home, to do that for other young men, that's why I do what I do, and and just seeing those young men, because I've had kids come in here and say they want to transfer, and I tell them my story. I said, I know what you're dealing with, but let me just lay it out to you this way. And some listen, and some decide they think it's better to move on, and then you just wish them well and support them, and you do that. But I've been blessed. I've been blessed with the people I've been around, the places that I've been, and to be able to work with all the great coaches that I've worked with all the outstanding young men that I've been able to work with. So I've got no complaints.
And Randy, when you were with UConn, it was the Big East. Then the Big East dissolved and became the American Athletic. The only thing left of the Big East was UConn, which really was a true member, and then there was Cincinnati and South Florida, which never really felt like it was the Big East. And then, we see the American. What was it like for you to coach in the American? I know obviously record-wise it wasn't ideal for UConn, but when you came back to UConn, what can you say about your time in the American Athletic? And did you agree or disagree with the school's decision to join the Big East, which obviously made you independent because the American was not going to keep UConn on as a football-only school? So what was it like for you to coach in the American? And then, the decision, how much did you have say in it? Did you agree with it? And what do you think about the fact that when UConn said we're going back to the Big East, that meant that there was no more football for UConn in the Big East Conference?
Well, first of all, I think the American Football Conference is a really good conference. I mean, I think they play really good football, and there's really good coaches and there's good players in the American. And again, when you take a look at it, you had basically UConn and Temple and Cincinnati in this area, and then everybody else was west or south, or wasn't really any natural rivalries there for you. And then Navy came along as a football only member, but and then the move to the Big East, I mean, that's one thing that was more of a university decision. that they made. And a football coach isn't going to be consulted on that, because again, the success and the history and tradition that they've had here in men's and women's basketball, is really second to none. And I don't think the American is not nearly as strong of a conference in basketball, as the Big East is. And then also, when you do take a look at the economics of it all, with all your other, your Olympic sports and the travel that they would have, you can understand clearly, why the university made the decision that they made, and what they wanted to do to see if we could stay in the American as a football only. That didn't work out. So the next best option to be able to play at the level that the university wanted to play at, they felt by going is the independent route. And, the independent route, it does present its challenges just like anything else. But what you do is you look to embrace those challenges. And then what you do is you find a way to put yourself in the best possible position so that your players can achieve success, on the field, being an independent.
Did you agree with it? I mean, are you okay with this move? Because it creates, obviously, you can, as an independent school.
I think it was the best option based on what they felt was the best decision for the entire athletic department, and then also from an economical standpoint as well.
How did you leave? I mean, Mike Oresco of the American, the commissioner, and everybody at the American. Did you feel like you left there, with positive terms? Did you feel that, there's a bond that you created there, or relationships you created there that can last forever? And how did you personally kind of go away from that?
Oh, I didn't have any issue with anybody at the American. That wasn't something that I think what again, when it gets down to it, and this is what happens, UConn made a business decision and the American made a business decision, so, that happens in everyday life. And, eventually, sometimes people might think it's selfish, but it's not. You always have to do what you think is best for your situation. And we at UConn did what we felt was the best in our situation, and the American felt what they did was best in their situation. We felt it was best for us to leave, to go there, and we wanted to have the opportunity to stay there as a football only, but the American felt that wasn't the best opportunity, so, they made their decision. So, you don't begrudge anybody with decisions they make, because people are making decisions which what they think is best for them to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So, I'm too old and been around this game too long to get frustrated or to get upset with certain things. And, again, because ultimately my job is to get my team the best I can and put us in the best possible position to win when we go out and play on Saturdays.
We have Liberty, Notre Dame, BYU, New Mexico State, Army, UMass, these schools that are independent. There's not a ton of them, but now UConn's a part of it. This is a new challenge for you in your 41st year. Do you think that UConn football can make a name for itself as an independent school?
Well, that's something that we'll see. I think we can. The one thing is we really haven't had a problem. Haven't had a problem really scheduling teams. I mean, we've got Syracuse on the schedule. We got BC on the schedule. We have some of those teams that we've played before on the schedule. We're going to get Pitt on the schedule. So teams that we've played previously here in this region that were part of the Big East, we're able to schedule. And then, like I said, we got Army, which is a trip that's close to here, UMass, which is close. So from a standpoint of there, I don't think we'll have any problems filling our schedules out.
And before I let you go, Randy, quickly here, you've been in the Northeast the majority of your coaching career with BC and Maryland and UConn and Syracuse, and to have, these connections that you've had and you've built over time and putting the schedule together, like you said, getting Pitt on the schedule, BC, Syracuse, how important is it for you to keep that Northeast feel? And do you still feel that Northeast football is relevant? I know it meant a lot to Coach Pasqualoni. I know it meant a lot to Coach Mack. And, you talk about Frank Maloney and whatnot, and Doug Marrone really preached about it when he was at Syracuse. Do you feel that Northeast football is still strong and has a place? And, do you want to keep that as a main point of your schedule? Maybe find a Penn State in there and try to play these Northeast teams for UConn and have these rivalries, or create, potential opportunities with teams that are only a few hours away?
No, I don't think Northeast football, and when I say this, I don't think Northeast football is as relevant as it used to be. And the reason being is when the Big East decided to dissolve, and and teams left, after it wasn't playing football anymore. I think that was kind of, you had teams going to the ACC, then you had teams going to the Big Ten. It's different because everybody's in different conferences, and you don't have that same every weekend rivalries going on, with those things. And, the thing that's disappointing to me, and this goes back to the days of the Big East, and again, it's decisions that people made. But I think if people made different decisions and look back on it, you could have had one of the best conferences in the country if you would have made it an all-sports conference when Miami was involved and everything else. You could have had a pretty darn good conference that, controlled, would have been better than the ACC, in my opinion, but, the powers to be didn't want that to happen, or, they could have had Penn State come in and let them come in from the get-go, everything else. But, there were decisions made, and it was more basketball driven at that time. And now what's happened is football is the big revenue producer. And, so that to me is where the downfall was.
So you move forward here. UConn decided not to play. A lot of teams decided initially not to, and then they did. Ultimately, hindsight 2020 of the year 2020, what does it benefit UConn to have not played this past season and going into being an independent after having a break between the American and the jump to independent? What does that do positively for you? And then a question back to your roots and your connection here. How important is it for you to recruit Central and upstate New York? Continue to do that.
Well, we're always going to recruit New York because, again, it's really a bordering state. And I have Frank Joffrey on my staff, who's a Syracuse grad, and he's from up there in the Rome area and Rome-Utica area. So, we're going to recruit that. And because I do think you can find players that can come down. And we got a really good running back, Nate Carter, out of Rochester. Wasn't heavily recruited, but I think he's going to be pretty good here with us. Came in last year, would have been a true freshman this year. But the decision for us not to play was one based on our situation. I mean, when we got back here for the summer, and I started to see what was going on with with COVID and the pandemic, and then what our state was doing, and the restrictions and everything else. I mean, I just didn't see a way. And then when it went to a conference-only schedule for the most part with all the conferences, to try to put a schedule together. We could have put a schedule together, but with all the other things in terms of the regulations that we had here and what you saw going on, and, knowing that, like we couldn't even use our locker room to shower in, and how are you going to play the games, and, after the games and all that, it was just a situation that you looked at it and you said, hey, why are you going to have this mental strain on these kids, all season long? I mean, that's not really a healthy situation. So just felt it was better for us to say, okay, hey, we're not going to play. We're going to take the time to get bigger and stronger, use that time in the weight room. We still got like 25, 26 practices in that we were able to get in. And So I think we got better because, our kids that didn't have the opportunity to redshirt, basically we redshirted the program for a year, which is what we needed. That was good for our program. Every program might not have been in that situation, but for us, that was something that was beneficial for us, and I think it's going to pay dividends as we continue to move forward.
Last note here with Randy Edsall, and you spend extended time with me, so I owe you a beer when I see you. But I gotta ask you here quick, two final notes here. Your family, your wife Eileen, your daughter Alexi, and son Corey, just what you can say to your family being with you through all this. I know Corey's on the staff with you. And then secondly, why is UConn, what sells UConn? So what can you say about the family? And then, as you step forward with UConn in 2021, what's the selling point for UConn? Why should student athletes come there?
Well, first of all, if you don't have a family that I'm lucky because my wife was a former athlete, she understands it, so she's been supportive for all these years. And then, my daughter went here to UConn when I was coaching here. My son went to Maryland when I was coaching there. And my daughter works for the Chick-fil-A Bowl down in Atlanta, so she's involved in football, and Corey's here. So, you have a family that understands it, that gets it, that, there's things that if I do regret anything, that I didn't get to spend as much time with my kids when they were growing up, and going to some of their games and doing those sort of things that my father and mother did, by coming to all my games. And, it's great now that I have this time with Corey, and, he's here, and he was at Maryland as a student and a student assistant while I was there. So again, you had that time, but you did miss some of those other times. And then I just think that UConn, moving forward, why it's such an attractive place is that you got a place that first and foremost, you're going to get an outstanding degree, because I don't care what anybody says. The one thing that these young men need when they go to school is to get the degree, because for some of them, football is only going to be 4 years, some 5, some maybe, if they might have a cup of soup, in the NFL, and not many guys play more than 2 to 3 years on the average, but you're going to get an outstanding degree, and then you're going to come to a place that, is going to allow you to develop into what you want to be as a student, as an athlete, and as a person. And you're going to play a tremendous schedule. And, back in 2012, we had the fourth most people in the country, UConn grads playing in the NFL. So you're going to get developed here. That's one thing. You're going to get developed. If you want an opportunity to try to get to the next level, you're going to get developed. You're going to be in the best facilities in the country, and you're going to have people who really care about you. You're going to have coaches that are going to shoot you straight. They're not going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to tell you what you need to hear. And you're going to play a challenging schedule. So if you want to have a chance to show somebody that play with the chip on your shoulder and show them that you can take on other people and beat them that people don't think you can, then this is a great spot for you.
That coming on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Cafe Kubal Studios with Randy Edsall. Randy, again, I appreciate so much you taking this time. I've waited a long time to have an opportunity to really have a full sit down with you, and I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, but I'd love to keep this door always open and have you back on the show as we talk about things. We opened a lot of doorways on the show today where I feel like I could have stopped and gone to anything and kind of elaborated more because your 41 years have been so incredible. So I want to say thank you. I appreciate it. I'd love to have you back. And as I walked up to you at your last American Athletic event, when we had the kickoff weekend, or had that event for a couple days in Rhode Island, when I walked up and shook your hand, I very much respect you, have from afar, and I can't thank you enough. So just know that I'm in your corner. I'm hoping the best for you, and I look forward to having you back on the show. And I definitely am very honored and thankful to God that I get to sit here today and finally get to spotlight you the way that I wanted to.
Well, I appreciate it, and I enjoyed it, and yeah, we covered a lot. But I'll come back. I'll come back on it sometime. But then what we got to do though is we got to add like Robert Drummond, Michael Owens, some of those guys, and make it a little bit more fun. Not that this was fun, but at least we'll be laughing.
Yeah, we'll definitely get them on it. And I talked to Terry Richardson and David Walker. I said if that Syracuse job ever became available, and they both said they'd get after it. And I got to say, I know you're at UConn, Randy, but if Syracuse was ever on the horizon down the road, would you be fighting Terry and David for the job?
No. I can tell you that. No.
All right, fair enough. Well, then I guess it's up to those two guys to duke it out and find out who's the head coach and who's the coordinator. But, yeah, I would love to have you back. And thank you for recruiting one of my closest friends, Rob Drummond. You saw something in him, and he's one of the most amazing people I've ever met. So, I know.
Hey,
go ahead.
He wasn't heavily recruited, but I'll tell you what, man. That guy played hard. He played hard. He gave it everything he had. I love the guy. So.
And he said to always give him a call because he knows a lot of the kids here in the area. He said, Randy ever calls me, I'm going to send him in the right direction. So.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you, Randy. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it.